Chapter 4. A Spy in the Shadows. There was nothing interesting on television. I let the remote control fall onto the duvet and yawned. If I carry on like this, I risk falling asleep, and it's only midnight. On the other side of the room, Org raised his head from the literature textbook. You know what you could actually try doing? Studying. His friend stared at him disgustedly. A superior mind such as mine does not need to study. Odd's answer was interrupted by the trilling sound of Ulrich's phone. Hello? The boy answered. Okay, I'm coming. He ended the call and started slipping on his shoes. Odd jumped to his feet. Where are you going? You're seriously not going to leave me here on my own, are you? It was Yumi. She sounded really worried, and she asked for me to run over to her place. Worried? Why? Ulrich threw him a fleeting glance. She didn't say. Odd was now also pulling on his shoes. I'd hate it if anything happened to Kiwi. Has your superior mind forgotten? But you're being punished, confined to quarters. Ulrich cut him off. Odd weighed in his answer. Yes, that's true, but I'm only in trouble if someone sees me. I went out this afternoon and nothing happened. Odd, you're not putting so much as your nose out of this room. As far as I'm concerned, you've caused enough trouble already. Oh, but of course, Daddy dearest, as you wish. Ulrich smiled in resignation. The two friends ran out through the door. Kiwi was lying in Hiroki's lap wrapped in a blanket. He was still breathing raggedly and his heartbeat was elevated. Odd hurled himself immediately at his wounded pet. Hiroki looked at him through eyes swollen with tears. I'm sorry, Odd. I'm so sorry. Odd delicately lifted the blanket. Kiwi's squat body was covered in scratches, 2 of which had cut very deep. One of his ears had been bitten and the small dog trembled like a quivering leaf. Odd caressed him carefully, being careful not to apply pressure on his injuries. What happened? Yumi, who had opened the door and was now hopping nervously from one foot to the other, explained. Ulrich's eyes became like laser beams, his gaze cold enough to burn. Congratulations, Yumi, truly. Not only did you not want to take care of Kiwi, but you also let him escape. And if that was not enough, you sent Hiroki off on his own to find him. Your little brother, at night, wandering around the city. She tried to speak, but Ulrich was so furious that he did not give her the chance. If you had been together, perhaps you would have caught Kiwi 5 minutes before he was attacked by these dogs, and now he would not be injured, and perhaps... Yumi was not the type to silently stay put when confronted with such a string of accusations, even if she felt inside that there was some truth to them. Indeed, perhaps that was why she was now so irritated. Fine, go ahead and judge me, she replied crossly. Could you have done any better, huh, Mr. Perfect, you? Shut it, the both of you! Odd was purple in the face and had yelled so loudly that Kiwi had yelped and Hiroki started in shock. Someone has hurt Kiwi badly and I still don't know what happened! Then, after taking in a great breath to calm himself down, he continued in a softer tone. Hiroki, where did you find him? At the Hermitage. Suddenly the little boy remembered the man he had glimpsed from behind. There was no road running around that side of the Hermitage, and if there was no road, that meant the man had to have been coming out from the Hermitage. Stammering, increasing troubled, Hiroki explained to them what had happened. An unknown man, commented Yumi. Perhaps he was looking for Aelita. Maybe he has something to do with Hopper, Ulrich exclaimed. We've got to go check. She nodded. I'll call Aelita. You'll handle Jeremy. We've all got to get to the Hermitage. Maybe we can get to the bottom of this story. 10 minutes prior, Jeremy had been sleeping peacefully in his room at Caddick, watched over by the poster of Einstein that hung on the wall. 10 minutes later, with a heavy jacket pulled over his pajamas and his round glasses worn crookedly on the end of his nose, he was bent face down in the garden of the Hermitage, a handheld torch illuminating the layer of snow that covered the ground. Around him, like fireflies, shone the torches of his friends. Hiroki alone had remained at the Ishiyama residence, looking after poor Kiwi. Here! Jeremy exclaimed suddenly. Come and see! The frozen snow was not the best medium for showing up trace details, but at one point close to the garage, the thick blanket had been torn away and the mud underneath was plowed with a tangle of paw prints. Dogs. My gosh, it was big! Commented Odd as he laid his hand onto one of the nearest prints. Look, the claws have dug right into the earth! It must have been a real animal! It's a miracle that Kiwi was still alive! Jeremy examined the ground with scrupulous attention. The tracks are confused, but if I'm correct, there were at least 2 dogs, both of the same breed, though one was a little lighter. See how this print is less marked? Stray dogs, Ulrich ventured. Jeremy shook his head, little convinced. Do you see here, against the garage wall? He indicated to a crescent under the wall, where the mildew had been scraped away. Chus did that, and I'm willing to bet that whoever responsible is here with the dogs, just like Hiroki said. Dogs, whispered Aelita. Like the ones I heard barking last night, just like in my dream. Jeremy, I'm scared. Jeremy felt an impulse to strongly embrace her in his arms, but he held his ground. Don't worry, Aelita. We'll solve this mystery. You'll see, and we'll be here to protect you. Odd slipped through the illuminated corridors of the dormitories. Oric had already returned to Cadix some time ago to avoid having to speak with Yumi. While he had insisted on accompanying the girl back to her house, he had wanted to check in on Kiwi. Hiroki had dutifully disinfected and bandaged the invalid as best he could. Now that they were clean, the injuries did not seem so terrible. In just a few days, he would be back to being the same joyful dog as ever. Odd Della Robbia! The boy jumped, a shiver running down the length of his back. Trembling, he turned around. Jim! Always a pleasure, my friend! Jim Morales' muscular arms were crossed over his chest, and he did not the least bit glad. Friend, my foot! Looks to me like you're breaking the terms of your punishment. Odd's mind raced ahead at full speed. I've only been out for, a moment to go to the bathroom. Honestly, the bathrooms are in the other direction. You've been out of the school, my boy, at night, in spite of your punishment. That tip-off was right, it seems. Odd's ears straightened suddenly. Tip-off? What tip-off? Who blew the whistle on me? Jim fumbled with the collar of his polo shirt, clearing his throat. Oh, well, did I say tip-off? I mean a hunch. My intuition. Jimbo, Odd interrupted. Calling him Jimbo always had a certain effect, especially when the teacher had gotten himself muddled. Who told you that I had left my room? Nobody. The truth came home to Odd in a flash. Sissy Delmas in a top and miniskirt standing amidst the frozen bushes of the ground and yelling, I swear that I'll make you suffer! It was Sissy, wasn't it? Well, you tell me, the gymnastics teacher responded evasively. In any case, that has no effect on this. Jim suddenly retook control. You violated the rules, first by bringing an animal to Caddick, and then by leaving the dormitories at night. Therefore, by the powers vested in me by, the principal, I declare you... That girl will pay for this, Odd whispered. Watch it, I declare you to be in punishment, for a full week. Now get to your room immediately, or I'll make it a fortnight. Odd's only option was to obey. While Odd was returning to his room, disheartened at being placed under house arrest, in Washington, D.C., capital of the United States of America, it was more or less 9 in the evening. The office did not enjoy a view of one of the city's great monuments, like the Washington Obelisk, the Capitol Building, or the enthroned statue of President Lincoln. It was like any other office, located inside one of so many suburban skyscrapers, all equal, anonymous gray buildings. But that did not mean that the person who occupied this office was of no importance. Quite the contrary. When the phone rang, the woman seated behind the desk answered immediately with a dry voice. Yes? On the other end of the line was Maggie, her secretary. Ma'am, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there is a call for you from France. The woman, codenamed Dido, made herself more comfortable on a revolving armchair and checked out of the corner of her eye the long row of clocks hanging over the door, one for each of the major capitals of the world. At this moment it was after 3 a.m. in France. For someone to call at this hour implied a certain urgency. Maggie, put them through to me. She made up her mind at last. In the meantime, pressing a button on the telephone that ensured the line was not being monitored. The voice that came down the length of the cable was male, deep, and embarrassed. Ma'am? Agent Lone Wolf. It's been some time. Yes, ma'am. I felt you ought to know that's what's happened in the computer science unit. They've turned something up. The computer science unit consisted of a number of slave computers that day and night monitored all searches made on the World Wide Web, hunting for suspicious words or phrases. It was an immense job, laborious, illegal, and more often than not, useless. Go ahead, we're on a secure line. This afternoon, we detected a search made on a private intranet. Someone was trying to obtain information first on Franz Hopper and then Walter Schaefer, who are in fact the same person. Dido sighed. Franz Hopper. Again. The case of Hopper was over 10 years old, but she did not need to check any dossier to refresh her memory. At the time, she had been a young, promising official at the beginning of her career, and the Hopper case had been her first, not to say her only, failure. Thank you for informing me, Agent, she said. The voice on the end of the telephone cleared his throat. I apologize, ma'am, but that isn't everything. The search was made in the internal network of Caddick Academy. Dido could not resist striking her fist against the surface of the desk. Franz Hopper and Caddick together, a dangerous mix, extremely dangerous. Very well, I see. I want a man assigned to work through Caddick's communications, telephone calls, internal searches, internet searches, everything. The past 2 months up till today, and I want a squad prepared to deploy in case of emergencies. Yes, ma'am. It might be something innocuous, a clerk reorganizing the archives or something out of that nature, but it's better not to run the risk. Yes, ma'am. Dido entered the call without saying another word and sat immobile next to the telephone. A part of her, after all, had been hoping for this case to be reopened. It was a chance to turn her single failure into a great success. The next morning, Jeremy and the others met by the coffee machine. Only Odd was missing. He had passed by 2 minutes previously, accompanied by Jim Morales, who was following him from close behind, and had just enough to direct a single despairing look at his friends. I knew they would catch him, Oric had observed as he watched them pass. We'd best go too, guys. Lessons will be starting. Jeremy was on his feet close to Aelita. They both had eyes that were black-rimmed from tiredness. I think the only solution is to put the Hermitage under observation. Do you mean organize some kind of guard duty? Yumi asked. Actually, I was thinking along the lines of closed-circuit television surveillance, Jeremy clarified. I can build the cameras here. Last night I went back to the factory and checked. Just about all the components I need are there. We then place them around the house, and from the computer in my room I can monitor them all. So if by chance this man decides to return, we will have an image of them, and then we will be able to report him to the police. Please, Yumi finished for him, right? Jeremy remained absent-minded. More or less. Alita smiled. But isn't your computer dismantled and stored in a big box? Didn't you say that you would only keep the laptop for your schoolwork? Actually, I seem to recall something like that myself, Ori sniggered. With Lyoko gone, I'm done with computer science. It's better this way. And you said it in such a solemn voice, too. Jeremy blushed. But that was before. This is an emergency. I'll reassemble everything tonight. If someone is searching for secrets of the Hermitage under our noses, then it serves us best to use every piece of technology at our disposal to flesh them out and gain some understanding. Jeremy was not the only student at Caddick to anxiously look forward to Professor Hertz's lessons. Suzanne Hertz was in fact a most beloved teacher because she did not limit herself to the educational curriculum, instead incorporating any scientific subject from DNA and computers to space travel, using examples and experiments that always fired the imaginations of all her pupils. Every lesson was a new discovery, except today everything seemed completely different. In fact, the professor did not even say hello to the students and instead went directly to her desk, seating herself with a frowning expression and removed the curriculum from her folder. Let's see. Open your books to page 48. Nicholas, would you start reading? Nicholas looked perplexed at his best friend Herb, who was also his roommate. Together they were Sissy's two bodyguards, but Herb was the science expert. And during lessons, Professor Hertz normally focused her attentions on him and Jeremy, the two most brilliant students, allowing Nicholas to sleep in peace. Hertz cleared her throat and fixed Nicholas with an annoyed stare. Is there a problem, Nicholas? The boy roused himself. No, miss. Then he rose, opened the book, and began to read aloud. By the early 1930s, scientists could consider themselves to be a good point in the comprehension of matter. Chadwick's discovery of the neutron seemed to have revealed all the mysteries that had previously surrounded the structure of the atom. Jeremy whispered to Alita, What the devil happened? What do you mean? She replied, raising an eyebrow. Look at the professor. It's not like her to just sit there like that. When was Hertz left a student to read the textbook and said that was enough? Hertz has never followed the curriculum. Always introduces her lessons, always. Brought the number of known elementary particles to 4. Jeremy was not the only to feel out of step. The whole class was looking around, somewhat lost. Worried that he would have to keep reading for the entire lesson, Nicholas managed to deliver a kick under the table at Herb, who cleared his throat and also rose to his face. Professor? Yes, Herb. I apologize for asking this, but are you feeling well? The woman raised her head over the book, her face expressionless. You see, Jeremy confirmed in a low voice to Alita, it's strange. I'm perfectly fine, Herb, thank you. And Jeremy, I would be very grateful if you cease chatting with your friend. Another word and you will be sent out of the class. Jeremy sent out of the classroom in punishment? Such an event had never occurred in the history of Caddick. Very well, Nicholas, Hertz exhorted. If you would continue, please. Thank you. Nicholas held back a sigh and started to read again. After a short while, a hand rose above the desk. Yes, dear? Professor Hertz asked in a strangely sweet tone. Eva Skinner rose to her feet, like a magnet drawing the attention of awe of the greater part of the male student body. Excuse me, Professor, she began, but I don't yet understand what elementary particles actually are. But of course, dear, Professor Hertz smiled. I'll explain immediately. Jeremy was still brooding over the threat of being forced out of the classroom when Alita jabbed him with her elbow and said, Have you noticed? She's strange, too. Not just Hertz. Yesterday she was struggling to enunciate words, and today she doesn't sound the least bit foreign. Her French is perfect. Jeremy nodded and began observing Eva, intrigued. When the lesson had ended, Professor Hertz shut herself in her office and slumped back against the door. Then she removed her glasses and rested a hand against her forehead. Teaching was always difficult. It demanded concentration and engagement with the subject material, but it was all the more challenging when one's head was obstinately set in a tizzy. It was all Jeremy's fault, and in truth she was glad to have scolded him in class for once. He was to blame, and his speeches on supercomputers and Franz Hopper. It was fortunate that she had thought of placing Walter Schaefer's dossier in the care of the principal. She knew Jeremy well enough to feel that he would have stopped at nothing to get his hands on those papers, and in so doing risk calling down genuine calamity. Delmas, however, understood the complexity of the situation, could be trusted to guard the document with discretion. Despite this, however, she did not feel at peace. Perhaps she was mistaken about everything, and that history had been marching forward for far too long. Talk. "Yes?" Hertz burst out, starting. "It's me," answered a female voice. It was Eva Skinner. "Ah, yes, come on in, dear. Do you wish to speak to me? Go right ahead." As the door opened, the professor flaunted a wide smile. The problem of Hopper would have to wait for now. Mrs. Marguerite de la Robia arrived home carrying a precariously balanced stack of packages and carrier bags that rose above the top of her head. The day was bright and lukewarm, making her wish she could go out for a walk. It was just a shame that she had to be back at work in half an hour. Laying everything on the table, she looked around perplexedly. Something was different from an hour ago, when she had rushed out to make a quick dash to the supermarket. It only took her a second to discern what was wrong. The sofa cushions had been moved. She had arranged them in their usual position the previous evening before retiring to bed. And before leaving the house, when she had checked for herself that the lights were out and the windows shut, the cushions had still been where she had left them, the cheerful pattern of red flowers on their covers downplaying the dark leather skin of the sofa that her husband loved so much. Her husband. Perhaps Robert had returned from work early? Then again, no. He would certainly have let her know. And later in the day he had a meeting scheduled, so he would not be returning to the house until late. Nevertheless, Marguerite called aloud, "Robert, are you here, honey?" No answer came. "I'm imagining things," she murmured in a low voice, once again occupying herself with the shopping. She had just stored the frozen spinach in the freezer when the telephone began to ring. Another oddity. No one ever called the house at this hour. She ran to answer it. Perhaps it was odd, but that would have been unusual. Her son almost never called home, except for when he had gotten himself into trouble. Somewhat breathless, she reached the bedroom, picked up the telephone from the bedside table, and finally answered it. "Hello?" And then, "Hello?" The line had not disconnected. Marguerite could hear a rustling sound through the handset. "What is this, a joke? Ha ha, very funny." But deep down inside she did not feel so calm. She was not an easily impressionable woman, out of necessity, with as clumsy a husband as Robert and an uncontrollable son in Odd, but that quiet rustling and the sound of withheld breathing was beginning to unnerve her. In a flash the disturbed sofa cushions came into context. This was no joke. There was someone in the house with her. With a start she flung the telephone receiver to the floor and hurled herself into the next room, and then she saw the shadow. The shadow sprang back, jumped through the living room window, and disappeared into the grass of the meadow. Mrs. de la Robia's howls echoed off the walls of the house. In the kitchen her shopping lay scattered across the floor. Yellow liquid dripped from 2 broken eggs onto the tiles.